Thanks to YouTube Originals for sponsoring this video. What's up, Wisecrack? Jared here. Full disclosure, this video is brought to you by Impulse, an awesome sci-fi show about a girl with psychic powers that is currently available on YouTube. Stick around for an exclusive interview with the star of Impulse, Maddie Hassan. The people behind the show dig our work and reached out to commission us to make a video that dives deep into the nerdiest crevices of sci-fi history. Presented with a uniquely geeky opportunity to obsess over tales of aliens and intergalactic war, we were beyond excited. Now, people typically associate sci-fi with modernity, jetpacks, spaceships, and weird-looking aliens that are most definitely coming for you. Generally, sci-fi is traced to the end of the 19th century, when rapid technological change inspired a massive proliferation of stories featuring tropes like utopias, dystopias, interplanetary voyages, time travel, and weird men venturing to the flaming hot core of the Earth because, well, how could that possibly go wrong? But then there's a far broader definition of sci-fi that predates Jules Verne by approximately 24 grandmas, and that's what we're diving into today. 3 fascinating works of really old sci-fi that are strikingly relevant to the genre today. So join us for this Wisecrack Edition on the secret history of sci-fi. Oh, and of course, spoilers ahead for 3 works of sci-fi you've had centuries to read. Also just want to give another shout out to Impulse for making this delightful geek out possible. It's a pretty great show, so be sure to check it out. Story number 1, A True Story by Lucian. Let's travel back to the 2nd century AD to meet one Lucian of Samosata. Lucian was a satirist and traveling orator, which means he wandered around trying to entertain crowds with his words. That is, he was an analog YouTuber. Along the way, dude concocted an astonishingly bizarre novel ironically called A True Story, which is now considered by some scholars to be the earliest surviving example of science fiction in the Western tradition. In this faux autobiographical tall tale, Lucian and co set out on an ocean voyage. When a cyclone sends their ship flying into the sky, the crew travel through the cosmos until they reach the moon. I know what you're thinking. Did Lucian invent the spaceship? Anyway, there they stumble upon an interplanetary space war between residents of the moon and the sun over the colonization of the morning star Venus. Keep in mind, and I cannot stress this enough, this was written before the invention of the telescope. The trippy battle is fought between a smattering of bizarre creatures, ranging from lycanopters, i.e. fowl who have lettuce for wings, animadromians who fly without feathers and turn into sailboats, or my personal favorite, cynobalanians, or men with dog faces who ride upon winged acorns, and of course, hail from the planet Dogstar, which incidentally is the name of Keanu Reeves' short-lived alt-rock band. Lucian also meets a species of moonfolk who have no women, thus the men are impregnated and give birth through their calf muscles. These dudes also have beards on their knees and wear clothing made of glass and live near a big pit that lets them hear every word spoken on Earth. During his travels, Lucian also encounters a city inhabited by living lights, an island made of cheese, i.e. heaven, and a city seated upon a mighty great and round cork, inhabited naturally by phelopods, who have corks for feet. Now you might be asking, who was Lucian's dealer? And we haven't even gotten to the part where Lucian and his bros are swallowed by a whale, find an entire world living inside it, and subsequently wage war on fish people, including the lobster-faced eel-like Traricanians and the half-man, half-cat Tridomendatans. So what makes this science fiction? I mean, the Bible also features a dude getting swallowed by a whale, and nobody calls the Book of Jonah sci-fi. According to scholar Darko Suvin, what distinguishes sci-fi from other kinds of fantasy is what he calls cognitive estrangement, essentially depicting an alternate version of our world that is both radically different and recognizable, frequently because of some development in human knowledge. So while Roman poet Ovid's Metamorphoses circa 8 AD depicts fantastical elements like women transforming into amber trees, it doesn't count as science fiction because it doesn't engage with any kind of development in human knowledge or technology. So is there any rhyme or reason to Lucian's wackadoo insanity? Context might help. In his time, the world felt inconceivably large, and lots of writers, historians, and explorers made their fortunes off of travelogues, or stories that described foreign lands in extensive detail. Lucian's life also coincided with the emergence of the precursors to modern-day ethnography, biology, and geography. This was a time period in which science was not based on experimentation, but instead on categorization and description. but wily scientists and writers alike frequently resorted to crazy stories about the great big unknown, presumably in hopes of achieving ancient versions of fame and fortune. Take Greek historian Herodotus, who wrote the first work of history in the Western world. Because he indiscriminately took testimony from locals around the world, he recounted unfounded tales about furry ants the size of foxes in Persia, cedar oil enemas in ancient Egypt, and cyclopses fighting griffins over massive piles of gold in northern Europe. For that accomplishment, dude has been called both the father of history and the father of lies. Then there was Greek physician and historian Titius, who wrote about people who were born old and die young, and also possessed ears down to their elbows, which, honestly, sweet. Lucian had some major beef with these people, calling their inaccuracies monstrous and intolerable. In the first paragraph of A True Story, he explicitly notes that he doth in a comical fashion glance at these various writers of untruth. Basically, Lucian is using his novel to roast these guys. Also, the text actually engages with the proto-scientific practices of the time. It's steeped with descriptions of each colorful society he discovers, with a specific emphasis on the materials that compromise their buildings, clothing, wings, foods, etc. In this way, Lucian's text is using fictional scenarios to lampoon the thinkers of his time, particularly in the way they made bold, reckless claims and mythologized ancient or far-flung cultures. Hundreds of years later, we see sci-fi writers engaging critically with the science of their time by imagining the future or alternate realities. Examples range from George Orwell's 1984, which interrogates the surveillance state, to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which responds to the Industrial Revolution. So in some ways, sci-fi continues to parallel Lucian's social satire by using a blatantly imaginary world to reveal greater truths about our current one. Ever seen Black Mirror? Story number 2, New Atlantis by Francis Bacon. Fast forward a few semi-miserable centuries to around 1623, where we'll hit up Sir Francis Bacon, a philosopher who also wrote the early sci-fi work New Atlantis. The story chronicles a crew of European sailors who find themselves marooned in the Pacific Ocean beside a mysterious island. In the semi-plotless story, the narrator tells us all about the island's weirdly perfect little society called Bensalem, or Son of Peace, a utopia which is, to his relief, filled with Christian people. These people seem pretty lit right off the bat, curing the ship's sick, housing them, and inviting them to fancy feasts. It's not all fun though. Bensalem is called by one resident the Virgin of the World. That's because it has strict marriage laws, like not letting you get married until a month after you meet, which seems pretty bare minimum, but okay. You also can't have sex before marriage, but there are fancy pools where you can send a friend to check out your boo naked, just in case anything funky's going on. Which again, appears to be Bacon's idea of a utopia. But stuff gets real interesting when the narrator talks with one of this world's big kahunas, a mysterious man known only as Father. He reveals that this utopia is run by a shadowy but apparently noble organization dedicated to gaining lots of knowledge and expanding the human empire. They have everything from wind engines, to water that prolongs life, to chambers of health that curate the air, to zoos where they experiment to enlarge, shrink, and even reanimate animals. They also have heaters that imitate the sun, perfume houses where smells make you feel like you're eating, magic houses where you can see false apparitions and illusions, and math houses where you can, do math. It's pretty clearly a paradise of health and scientific discovery, with an ever-growing influx of knowledge from the merchants of lights, or folks who sail to foreign countries to gather books, information, and experiments, which are then carried out and elaborated on by a bureaucracy of scientists. Basically, picture an elite college campus without any of the sex, drugs, or atrocious cafeteria food. At this point, Bacon appears to have gotten writer's block, so the story just kinda stops. Buzzkill. The sheer imaginative nature of the work rendered it important to both scientific thought and the development of the sci-fi genre, even if it's not exactly a page-turner. Of course, Bacon didn't invent the concept of a utopia. Imagining a perfect society dates back to Plato's Republic, written circa 375 BC, while the actual term utopia comes from Sir Thomas More's 16th century book of the same name. Broadly, a literary utopia is, according to scholar Northrop Frye, a speculative myth designed to contain and provide a vision for one's social ideas. Importantly, Fry argues that a utopian writer examines his own society, identifies its significant elements, and then demonstrates what that society could manifest as were those elements actually fully developed. Take Francis Bacon. He lived in a pre-scientific age, though there were some inklings of ideas about some inventions he outlined in the story, from submarines to airplanes to microscopes. However, magic and alchemy were still widely believed in and practiced during Bacon's life. Bacon was familiar with Renaissance magic, but rejected it and instead became a renowned advocate for a fledgling concept, the scientific method. In fact, he included some magical conceits within New Atlantis reframed as scientific inventions, such as turning non-metals into metals. This fits neatly within Clarke's Law, coined by sci-fi author Arthur C. Clarke, which states any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Anyway, Bacon here took aspects of his contemporary culture, i.e. nascent science and ancient magic, and realized their full potential as technologically advanced science. In this way, Bacon conceives of the greatest mankind could achieve were it to employ his methods of rigorous science instead of shoddy science or magic. That's what makes Bacon's utopia so unique and prophetic. It took elements of a pre-scientific world, one where the idea of orderly researchers and white lab coats and goggles couldn't have been imagined, and basically conceived of a giant research university, where science and technology was the prime facilitator of a society's peace, wellness, and prosperity. This prospect has been explored throughout the history of science fiction, from H.G. Wells' early 20th century A Modern Utopia, which imagines a world where technology performs all human labor, to Star Trek's 1960s imaginings of tablet computers, Google Glass, and non-invasive diagnostic beds. Story number 3, MicroMegas by Voltaire. The last stop on our tour of ancient sci-fi genius brings us to Voltaire, French Enlightenment man better known for philosophizing his little gray wig off than for being grandfather to sci-fi. But Voltaire's oft-neglected story MicroMegas is actually yet another important forerunner of the genre. His work follows the intergalactic exploits of his titular character, MicroMegas, who we'll fondly call Micro, a spirited young man who hails from one of the planets orbiting the star named Sirius and is casually 120,000 feet tall, has 1,000 senses, and can live for over 10 billion years. After being exiled, much like Voltaire himself, Micro sets off for adventure, visiting Saturn, where he befriends a dwarf who is a meager 6,000 feet tall with only 72 senses and 15,000 years to live. Micro and his pal travel from planet to planet, eventually arriving on Earth. There, they eat 2 mountains for lunch. They try and fail to find life on Earth until they notice a whale the size of Micro's thumb. Soon, they also find a ship of microscopic humans who they naturally assume have no souls or thoughts. Using a thumbnail as a speaking trumpet, they talk to the Voyagers, including a group of philosophers, who teach them about the triumphs and tragedies of the human race. Most notably, Micro learns that some humans believe the entire universe was created uniquely for mankind, which just plain makes him laugh. The friendly giant offers to write a philosophical book that reveals the point of everything. Upon receiving the manuscript, the humans find only blank pages. First and foremost, Voltaire's story fits solidly in the science fiction tradition because it, like the previous works, engages with the science of its day, referencing several preeminent scientists who had invented things like the microscope, discovered the life cycle of insects, and first observed bacteria. While microscopes allowed us to suddenly discover the minuscule creatures living among us, Voltaire asked, if that's true, what else is true? And imagined a creature so large that it made human beings the seemingly insignificant microorganisms. This renders the tiny philosopher's statement that the cosmos revolves around man absurd in context, like a bacteria on your thumb declaring itself the center of the universe. In this way, Voltaire questions some of the science and philosophy of his time, which did posit man as central to a universal plan. Reimagining man's place in the universe remains a pivotal theme in sci-fi, which questions our significance by positing outside worlds that make ours seem small. Most notably and delightfully, there's Wisecrack favorite Rick and Morty, which, through the introduction of millions of realities, forces us to examine whether anything matters at all, a paralyzing question that can definitely make you a bummer to date. Other examples include The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in which the central character watches planet Earth be casually destroyed to make way for an intergalactic bypass, as well as much of H.P. Lovecraft's work. Viewed in this way, sci-fi seems about as modern as the Egyptian pyramids or resenting your ex. Thinkers have contemplated the varying implications of human progress and technological advancements as far back as the 2nd century AD. What makes these 3 works we discuss so special is that they seem to be in conversation with many of the modern sci-fi classics we know and love. And that's pretty awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed this mega geek out. Big shout out again to Impulse for their support, and definitely go check out their show using the link in the description. You can check out the show for free on YouTube with ads, or skip commercials with premium. Thanks again to YouTube Originals for sponsoring this video. Also, stick around for an exclusive interview with the star of Impulse, Maddie Hassan, starting now. Alright guys, thanks so much for sticking around. As promised, we have here the star of Impulse, Maddie Hassan. You can check it out on YouTube using the link in the description. Maddie, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Great. So Impulse is both a sci-fi and a coming-of-age story. Henrietta has to learn to cope with these newfound powers while navigating a complicated family life and being the new kid in town. So what are some of your favorite sci-fi works?
I like movies like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
I liked Ex Machina.
Yeah.
I like movies that are like in the real world, like how something would be in the real world.
Yeah, a lot of emotional movies there.
Yeah.
So, do you have any favorite actors?
Tilda Swinton, Kate Blanchett, Michael Shannon.
Oh, cool. Yeah, these are all people that give very intense performances.
That's my theme.
So, what drew you to the project of Impulse, or specifically the character of Henrietta?
I really liked Henry. That's what drew me to Impulse, other than Doug Liman, obviously. Mm-hmm. I just liked that she was not likable, and she was very rough around the edges, and there's a lot of emotional depth.
A lot of Henry's arc is dealing with PTSD. Did you do any research about post-traumatic stress disorder before the project started? And did anything surprise you about it?
Yes, I met with a therapist who meets with a lot of victims of sexual assault and deals with PTSD and trauma, and I spoke to her at length, did some research on my own, and spoke to people that I know who have been assaulted and deal with PTSD. And something that, I don't know if it surprised me, but I did find it interesting that the therapist that I met with told me is that when you go through a traumatic event, such as being assaulted, it's not necessarily outwardly emotional in the moment. You're not necessarily screaming or crying. A lot of people say that they disassociate and leave their body, and so it's sort of a blank kind of reaction, which is obviously, But I thought that was quite cool because Henry physically manifests that.
Has anybody reached out to you about some of the more serious themes that the show deals with and given you any positive reinforcement about the portrayal and how it may help people?
Yeah, people have reached out and said that it's, positively affected their lives, and said, that experience is really similar to something that I went through, and I shared this with my parents, and it helped them understand what happened to me. Or in Comic-Con in New York, there was a reporter who has autism, and Towns has autism in the show, and he said it's his favorite show, and he loves it so much because it makes autism seem like something very positive and like almost a superpower, whereas other shows make it seem like something that is holding you back in life. And it meant a lot to him, and I thought that was really good. It's really cool when you can see that.
Yeah. Can you remember, what has been the most challenging aspect of this character or this role?
I think just dealing with the trauma and the heavy subject matter and wanting to get it right, especially in season 1. I put a lot of pressure on myself to make sure that because it meant so much to me. So yeah, the heavier emotional stuff has been, difficult, but good, challenging and good.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us. Congratulations on the show. It's really awesome.
Thanks.
You can check out Impulse on YouTube. You can check it out in the link in the description. I want to thank Maddie again for joining us. Thank you so much, Maddie.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Peace.